The Deathslinger... The Deathslinger? To hell with it. Caleb is a curious creature, at least since he's the only character that hits with a special attack, yet only damages through basic. Slinger, unlike most of the killers I love, is purely mechanical, difficult and nuanced in execution. To play him well, one has to master his harpoon, which requires tens and hundreds of hours. However, this guide contains all you need to know to do it as fast as possible. Without further ado, let's move on to his power, the Redeemer. The Redeemer lets Caleb shoot a survivor, in case of success reel him in, and hit with a basic attack. Being hit while chained also leaves survivors in deep wound. In terms of numbers, there are several parameters you need to know, and here they are. First of all, Slinger requires some time to both aim down sights and cancel his aim. Next up, his maximum shooting distance is kept at 18 meters, and missing a shot leaves him in a 1.5 second cooldown before he can reload again. Reloading itself takes 2.75 seconds of his time. Redeemer's chain has a fixed durability, however it depletes with different speed depending on object's collision and whether the survivor struggles or not. Chain breaking leaves him in a 2.75 second stun. Here you can see base numbers of the chain durability depletion. As you can see, with no struggling and collision it is basically immortal. However, time depletes much faster when survivor struggles, while object collision destroys the chain entirely. Combined struggle and collision look like this. It's worth mentioning that Slinger moves with different speed while reeling. Speed depends on moving direction and if there's collision with an object. Survivors can break the chain, which forces Caleb into 2.75 second stun. You can avoid this by pressing M1 at any moment before the chain breaks. Upon doing so, Slinger will remove the chain and perform an attack. If a healthy survivor breaks the chain, they become injured and gain deep wound. However, breaking the chain cannot down injured people. It's important to know that direction of Slinger's movement while reeling does not affect reeling speed. It does, however, affect survivors' ability to wiggle while struggling. Usually you are better off moving backwards while reeling. Caleb can interrupt several actions with the Redeemer, such as gen repairs, healing and opening gates. He can, in theory, interrupt unhooking, but you are always better off expecting it not to work. Window for unhook interruption is around 0.3 seconds, less than Caleb's aim down sights. Actions like vaulting and dropping a pellet cannot be interrupted. Pellets are Slinger's major pain, for this is what it looks like. Windows on the other side will be your friends. Harpooning a survivor during a window vault is an almost guaranteed hit, just remember to pull him to the middle of the window afterwards. Another thing that bugs my mind, yet most people don't talk about, is how Slinger works with hard stuck animations, like entering a locker. All shots done into these animations are deflected. Last thing important to understand is Redeemer's hitbox. It is a small door, in fact, which means that Slinger can shoot through any gap in any texture, and the shot will go through. And this is where Redeemer's explanation ends. It's time for us to cover an aspect of this game you have to know to become a successful Slinger. Let's talk hitboxes. Hitboxes in DBD are weird, and any Slinger has to know them. You might actually have heard or noticed that survivor hitboxes are not the same as characters look. They are more like squares or ovals, and are the same for each survivor, so let's take a look. For that I have photoshopped a crosshair on the screen, so that you can see my real aim. Now check out how far you need to aim to actually miss a shot. Same thing happens if you aim above the survivor and between their legs. You can even see how harpoon teleports to the survivor model from there. The general where to aim rule seems to be as follows. For female survivors, error margin is full body size from spine to belly, while for male models it tends to be half that size. It is worth mentioning that hitboxes are centered around survivors' butts, which is extremely important when they start doing something like crouching. When their model moves forward, in running and crouching, but their hitbox remains the same, near their butt. With that out of the way, Caleb has a couple problems I want to point out in this guide. To be honest, I feel like Slinger is a synonym to problem, but if I need to dig into details, I see two major problems. First one is that Slinger is quick to injure a survivor but long to down. This is kinda self-explanatory actually. When you land your first shot, survivor will get injured no matter what. However, all hell breaks loose with an injured one in chase. No matter how good you understand hitboxes, numerous pellet loops in this game are almost or completely unplayable for Caleb due to chain break speed. Survivors know which pellets are which and will pre-drop them to make your life harder. And this opens you up to the second part of the problem. Slinger is a 110 speed killer, which makes regular looping a challenging task. Finally, not every survivor will fall for your trick shots. If a survivor knows about a certain hole, he will position himself to not fall victim. All of this paints a sad picture with Slinger's anti-loop against an injured player. It will be easier to show actually. You see, Ivan, Rom1, a comrade of mine and the Slinger main, has sent me a footage of his trick shots, which, as amazing as they are, just do not result in hits for him. I see that as a confirmation of what I just told you. Slinger is the first to injure, I mean look at how strong these first hits are, yet he's not that good to down. However, the only real answer to how to down faster a Caleb is still to learn how to shoot his hardest loops, any loops in fact. Now it's time for the last sad part. Although Slinger's max range is 18 meters, optimal range for him is up to 12. With that, we move on to his second problem. He is a slow, tall, 32-meter terror radius killer. This is a disastrous combo for most big maps in this game. I don't get why, but most of them are extremely open and provide long view distance for everyone. This means that Slinger is easy to spot, while his speed gives survivors enough time to relocate in a safer area. Now, when we've covered that, time for some actual tips on how to play Caleb. What should you do as Slinger? First and foremost, he is slow. This means you are better off finding an area to control, preferably with a strong, small 3-gen and weak loops around. Second advice is basic yet crucial. Be patient with your shots. That's something I lack completely, but you need to be patient, otherwise you will be punished. Remember, 1.5 seconds before reload, being slow while reloading and then catching up as a 110 killer. Next, you can hold a survivor spirit for up to 6 seconds usually. I highly encourage you to use that time to your advantage. You can choose where survivor gets injured or downed. Reasons to hold a survivor spirit are different, and here's a list of my favorites. First, relocating survivors from or to objects proves useful. Second, you can spear an unhooker and secure a hook stage. Finally, getting a shot on an unhooked survivor allows you to wait until base kit BT is down and then tunnel them. Trust me, you will do this a lot. The way I see it, everything else comes down to how much time and effort you are willing to put into this killer, so let's move on to his add-ons. His add-ons are in fact quite weak and boring, in other words, they are bad. You can see my tier list right here on the screen, and in this guide we will focus on the most important ones, starting with reload speed. Green ones reduce cooldown by 0.5 seconds, bronze do by half that number. All of these allow Caleb to use his gun more freely with less severe punishment upon missing, and no human lands every shot they take. Two right add-ons work on missed shots only. The two left add-ons work on any shot, thus they also help you in chase by reducing the time a survivor has to relocate after being hit. Next up, BHVR's cigar and its minor sibling, chewing tobacco. They reduce stun duration after chain breaks, and quite significantly, I must say. Many consider the cigar to be the best Slinger's add-on, and I get why. However, I find faster reload much more consistent in general, thus it helps better with landing a second hit on survivors, and BHVR's cigar is a close third. After that, we have Prison Chain. Prison Chain increases the time needed to deplete chain's durability by 10%. This is good in theory, however in practice chain oftentimes will fail you where you need it the most, in loops with inescapable collision where this 10% is barely noticeable. Finally, the last add-on worth mentioning is Iridescent Coin. If with this add-on you hit a survivor from 12 meters or further, they will become exposed while chained. This sounds strong. In reality, however, 12 meters is where risky distance starts for Caleb, and this distancing also allows for timely body blocks from more experienced survivors, a common thing against Deathslinger. Some say that by camping you can engineer situations for this add-on to shine. Well, you've just seen decent survivors bringing down my engineering. Overall, Iridescent Coin is just not consistent enough to be higher in my list. I don't find any other add-ons good enough to use or to discuss. This means we are in for the final part of this guide, Buildcrafting. Once again, Slinger is a low mobility killer with strong injuring capabilities, but he does need help to down. Don't forget that most his hits and all his downs come from his basic attacks. This means that for gen regression he works best with gen lock perks and anything that does not require him to kick gens. As for faster downs, exposed and chase boosting perks work wonders. Just never run play with your foot on him. It loses tokens on every shot you make. From my experience, 3 perks are ideal for Caleb. Save the best for last, Jolt and Hex Blood Favor. STBFL feels like Basher's Cigar or Reload add-ons, just much better. You can also save tokens by breaking your chain with Environment to injure Obsession. Jolt always triggers upon Slinger's downs, and you can always pull a survivor closer to several gens if you want to hit with Jolt. Finally, Blood Favor allows you to not care about any problematic pellets after injuring a survivor, resulting in much faster early chases. Hex will be gone soon after though. Worth mentioning is that Slinger naturally goes well with perks that remove his terror or give survivors Oblivious. Welcome Hex Plaything. Same thing with Aura Read perks. I'm all ears is a solid choice, but not chili. Don't pick barbecue and chili. Now let's move on to build examples. First, 3 builds of different style to choose from. Passive Slowdown on the left, Chase in the middle and Blood Favor Exposed on the right. These are my absolute favorite builds of different styles. And although these builds are strong as is, you may want a universal solution. Like for example this build that takes all the best from the triad before. Finally, if you have just begun your journey in the game and still want to play Caleb, this default build will help you. It only consists of basic perks and his own teachables, and it is still solid. These of course are not all the builds you can use, just my favorites. More to that, I'm sure all of these can be improved and tuned to one's playstyle, so go for it, kings and queens. And this concludes the guide. Thank you for watching, I hope you've learned something new, or had a good time watching at least. With that said, goodbye and I'll see you in the next one.